Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Touch MBA podcast. I am your host, Darren. I want to wish you all a happy 2024. I'm excited for this year. We're going to continue interviewing admissions directors from top-ranked MBA programs from around the world. We're going to keep interviewing successful students and MBA alumni from these programs to really help you guys make the best MBA investment, get into your target programs, and get a life-changing business education. I'm also excited to just pursue some more topics that I find really interesting, like the changing nature of business education and the changing value of the MBA degree. So stay tuned for another year of podcasts here at Touch MBA. So I thought I'd start this year with a different type of episode. Actually, over the past 10 years, we've had a number of listeners who have shared their story and their hard-earned lessons from their journey in written blog posts on our site at touchmba.com/journey. And I consider many of them to be full of timeless MBA application wisdom, taking their entire application journey and refining and condensing it so that you, as someone who is planning to apply soon, can learn from their hard-earned experience. And our goal at Touch MBA has always been to give you guys evergreen content. I know that's like a very marketing type of buzzword, but it's true. We want our content to be as timeless as possible. And while some of our school interviews might age after, 3-4 years, I think all these MBA application journey posts have really stood the test of time and will last for a long, long time. So if you do want to share your story, if you've gotten into your target MBA program or maybe not, and you just want to share what you've learned, you can reach me at touchmba.com/contact and just fill out that form there. I'd love to hear from you and post your story if it can really help applicants. So I'm going to share the main lesson from 3 of these blog posts, okay? I'm going to share one big lesson from each post or from each applicant, but please know that each of these posts actually contain many lessons. But for the sake of this episode, I'm just going to extract one big lesson from each of them, okay? So what we're going to be talking about in today's episode, some common problems that some of you might face. For example, what if you're not from a blue chip company? How about if you're having difficulty shortlisting schools that you'll be competitive at? And how about dealing with rejections, which sucks? How can you deal with rejections? What can you learn from them? And before we get into the episode, just a few reminders. You can get free school selection help at touchmba.com. We've helped over 4,000 applicants from over 50 countries with school selection and just trying to, give an unbiased expert opinion on their profile that could help you guys make the best MBA investment. Secondly, if you really want to strengthen your profile and you don't want to spend thousands of dollars on admissions consultants, please do check out our online admissions course at touchmba.com/course. It's called the Admissions Edge. It's the best of Touch MBA condensed into 9 short videos. We waste no time and we just try to go through every part of the application and give you the best tips we've learned here at Touch MBA that can help you materially improve your chances of getting into your targets. And last but not least, I want to thank our sponsor of this episode, the sun. What is more important to us on Earth than the sun? Without the sun's heat and light, the Earth would be a lifeless ball of ice-coated rock. The sun warms our seas, stirs our atmosphere, generates our weather patterns, and gives energy to the growing green plants that provide the food and oxygen for life on Earth. Thank you, Google, for that summary, and thank you to our sponsor, the sun. Let's talk about the first problem that I mentioned that some of you might have, which is you don't work for a well-known company. You don't work for a blue chip company. You're not working for Google or Amazon or Facebook or Goldman Sachs or these big, big names in the business world. What should you do? So the title of this post was Admitted to Kellogg, INSEAD, Ross, Fuqua, Johnson. Here is how I did it. And it was written by Lee Da-Ming, who ended up going to Kellogg. Let me summarize Daming's story really quickly for you. So when he came to Touch MBA many, many, many years ago, he was working for an investment conglomerate backed by a top Chinese entrepreneur that was not well known. But this company was involved in a number of business development deals, mergers and acquisitions, and joint ventures involving luxury hotel chains, across China, Australia, and New Zealand. So this applicant, although he felt he had strong work experience, worked for a relatively unknown company. And he ended up getting into Northwestern Kellogg, and he eventually fulfilled his post-MBA goal of working for a top management consulting firm in China post-MBA. He was an engagement manager at McKinsey & Company for 3 years, and then he was working for Alibaba as a senior expert, and then he moved on to Walmart in China, and then now he is currently a vice president and now general manager at K11 Concepts. So he's had a very successful career post-MBA, and this is one of my favorite posts. So here are his tips. So I'm going to read a selection from his blog post. Okay, here we go. There's a common misconception that non-blue chip feeder companies might be disadvantaged in the application process. This is not necessarily true. Schools are looking for professional diversity, and they still want a broad variety of students from different backgrounds. Broadly speaking, there are 2 categories of applicants: traditional feeder companies versus non-feeder companies. By feeder companies, I mean blue chips that regularly send applicants into top business schools. For example, McKinsey, Procter & Gamble, Goldman Sachs. Admissions teams understand candidates from blue chips such as Goldman or McKinsey because they have gone through rigorous selection criteria and world-class training. However, applicants from these companies are generally competing against their colleagues who mostly have high GMAT scores and great commercial awareness. An applicant in this situation needs to highlight what makes him or her different, such as having interesting extracurriculars, greater career progression, and higher GMATs or GPAs, or challenging personal achievements. Now, non-feeder companies don't send MBA candidates to the business schools as frequently, hence they are companies that admissions teams are less familiar with. For applicants from these companies, showcasing the quality of their work experience then becomes important. Some tips include clearly showing your company's revenue/assets/industry rankings, clearly demonstrating career progression in your resume and explaining your ranking in your peer group. For example, you were 3 years ahead of typical schedule to have attained XYZ position. If you have worked on large deals with prestige players, explain them in the resume or the interview. Making sure your referees explain the above 3 points I just made in his or her reference letter. And finally, showing the admissions that you bring some unique insight not easily found from a typical banker, consultant, or other Fortune 500 company applicants. Okay, so I think that is such great advice. If you're not from a blue chip company, you really have to highlight the quality of your work experience. Your work experience really becomes paramount. And so you have to do some of the work, right, for the admissions officer who's reading your application. So if your company is not well known, give examples or show them why it is a really interesting company. Like Daming said, this could be how much money it makes, its assets, or its industry rankings. Okay, so you give some context to the company that you're working for that's less well known. If you can, show career progression, that you've progressed ahead of schedule. I love this tip. If you've worked on large deals with prestige players, in other words, with companies or people that are famous or well known, put those in your resume or explain them in your interview. Make sure your recommenders are looped in to these points so that they can reference them in the recommendations. And finally, show the admissions that you bring some unique insight that you can share with your class, right? Because the admissions teams are going to know, they're very familiar with the top consulting firms, the top banking firms, and I would say now, obviously, the top tech firms and the type of experience these candidates are bringing to business school. But if you're from an unknown company, what's your unique insight that you can share with your classmates, that you can contribute to your class, that will position you well to succeed post-MBA? And Daming definitely did that. And he ended up getting into those amazing schools, Kellogg, INSEAD, Ross, Fuqua, and Johnson. All right. So I think there's some great tips in his post about what to do if you're not from a blue chip company. Let's move on to the second lesson. And this was written by William Morgan, or Will. Let me summarize Will's experience. So before Will attended the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin, he was working as a senior field engineer and then an engineering manager at Baker Hughes. After he got his MBA from McCombs, he's been at Amazon. He was in operations management, and now he is in product management at Amazon. And the title of his post was, I got into 8 top MBA programs. These are my top 3 tips. Okay, again, you can find all these hard-earned lessons of listeners just like yourself at touchmba.com/journey. One of Will's tips from his posts, and I'm going to start reading from it, goes as follows. Choose priorities, then choose schools. Take a serious look at what your priorities are before you start reading school promotional brochures. Know what you want before you go shopping, because business schools are very good at marketing. For me, I wanted to go to a top 25 school with other priorities, including cost/scholarships and location, including international locations. The most important thing to consider is fit, but you won't know much about this at first. But make a short list of schools to apply to. You will find the right fit as you go through the rest of the process. I'm very glad I found Darren in Touch MBA at this point in the process. Darren's profile review is free, and his knowledge of schools played a key factor in helping me narrow down my selection of schools to apply to. Okay, I'm going to pat my shoulder on that one. Let's continue on with Will's post. I applied to 8 schools. I wouldn't suggest applying to 8 schools except to the most committed and responsible applicants. To properly prepare each application, I tried to space out deadlines as best as I could. I chose round 1 deadlines for my top schools, but I spread out all the applications between the first 2 rounds. I used an Excel spreadsheet to keep up with all the deadlines, to-do lists, and notes for each school. Applications are more than just a form and an essay. Researching schools is necessary to see how they fit into your matrix of priorities. It also helps uncover the secrets of fit and culture. Properly researching schools and networking with students and alumni is a long and exhausting process. I used LinkedIn to contact alumni and students from prospective schools. Not everyone responds, but those who do are usually excited to share their experiences. These conversations are critical to evaluating culture and fit. You will learn much more than what a school puts on a brochure, the good and the bad. Networking doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, but students and alumni are generally excited to help applicants learn more about their MBA program. Try finding recent graduates or students with a similar background as you. For example, same previous employer, same previous job, function, etc. Try to gather the intangibles by drawing on their experience at business school. This is essential to choosing the right schools and will give you an edge when writing application essays. If they can't answer a question or aren't familiar with something you are interested in, they might know someone that can help. I would always try to end the conversation with something like, is there anyone else that you recommend I contact? Okay, so a lot of great tips in these 3 paragraphs from Will. And what I love about this post is that he wrote it many years ago. He wrote this in 2016, yet these tips are still as relevant as ever. And he was ahead of the curve in terms of realizing how important these LinkedIn reach out chats are, right? To really get to know a school. And sometimes you're going to be doing it with strangers. And we've had many episodes talking about the importance of the coffee chat with current students and alumni. So a couple things I want to highlight from these few paragraphs. First, choose priorities, then choose schools, right? Know what you want before you go shopping. I love that as a quote. But Will is also very clear that you're going to make a short list at first, but that short list is going to change as you do more investigating. So it's really an iterative process. Still, you need to know what you want out of business school. what are your must-haves? And I've covered this ad nauseum on this podcast, but it bears repeating for new listeners. What are your must-haves in your MBA program? If you start from that point, not only will you be able to better research schools and make the best MBA investment, but your MBA application is going to be so much stronger because you basically have a use case, right, for why you're applying to business school. You're going to find the right students and alumni to talk to. You're going to get information that's not on websites and brochures and social media. So you're going to come with a very unique and well-researched application. And countless admissions directors who have been on my show have mentioned that is so important to do. So again, another quote that summarizes this: researching schools is necessary to see how they fit into your matrix of priorities. Last thing I want to highlight from Will's post is that the conversations with recent alumni and students are critical to evaluating culture and fit. You will learn much more than what a school puts on a brochure, the good and the bad. Think about this, right? When you're applying to business school, you're really picking a family or a tribe to marry into, right? You're not going to get an MBA a second time. So it's important to really find the tribe that you're proud to be a part of, that you're excited to be a part of, and that you will be excited to give back to and benefit from. Are you able to really know your tribe's language, know what their values are, know what's really driving that tribe without having conversations with warm-blooded people going to these programs and that have been through these programs? No. Right? So I always encourage applicants to talk to at least two people, and ideally many more than that from each program that you're applying to, right? To really just understand what these programs have to offer and be able to speak the language of these different tribes. So when you apply, you're going to sound much more in the know. You're going to be much more confident about why you're applying to that school and what you want to get out of the school. And those on the other side of the table, the admissions directors, they'll know it. They'll know it instantly. Okay? So those might seem like common sense tips, but they're still worth repeating. Let's go to our last lesson. And this lesson comes from Bren's blog post, which is titled 2 Years, 8 Dings, and 2 Scholarships Later, My Reflections on the MBA Application Process. Let me sum up Bren's story. Before getting his MBA, he worked at GLG, or the Gerson Lehrman Group, as a senior research associate, research manager, and team lead. He attended Birmingham Southern College. And so it took him 2 years to get into his desired MBA program, which ended up being Emory University's Goizueta Business School, where he got his MBA in 2020. And since then, he has been working at Boston Consulting Group as a consultant and project leader. I really remember Bren because at the time, we were running our Admissions Edge course, and our forum was open, and Bren was posting all sorts of questions in there, and he was so dedicated to getting into a top MBA program, even though it took him 2 years and a lot of heartbreak, a lot of dings, okay? So I'm going to share what he wrote here. I'm going to take out one selection from his post. The ups and downs of my process gave me a few moments in which I considered giving up my MBA goal. After hearing no multiple times, my mind began doubting my credentials and profile. It took a mental reset and serious reevaluation of the admissions process before I regained my resolve. What made me decide to persevere was a simple realization. MBA admissions is a crap shoot. Unless you are a bona fide superstar with a killer GMAT mixed with blue chip work experience and extracurriculars, you will always have more in common with your competition than you think. I believe my early results were somewhat unlucky, but within realistic bounds given the limited data points. In basketball, so Bren was a basketball player, there's a common confidence-inspiring phrase used by coaches to shooters when they have an unlucky streak of missed shots. Keep shooting. I simply had to keep shooting my shot and let the law of averages take over. Sure enough, I was rewarded in round 2 and even got lucky. If I had been admitted to my round 1 safety school, which was Texas McCombs, I would have happily attended without knowing that a full ride was out there waiting for me. Wow, I forgot. This is Darren speaking. I forgot he got a full ride. Back to Bren's blog post. With the understanding that applicants are more similar than dissimilar, and that there are only a few numbers most decisions are made on, you cannot take any single or even handful of admissions decisions personally. Stick with it and try to focus on what is actually different or unique about your profile. My own roller coaster ride of an admissions process also showed the importance of knowing your story. While I spent a ton of time on my first few applications, I was often playing the game versus actually saying who I was and what I wanted to do. The rejections hammered home the common advice, quote unquote, just be yourself. I recalibrated for round 2 and was able to tell my story more efficiently while being true to myself. I think the major piece of advice on this front is to get started on your story and answer these questions. Why MBA, why now, and why this business school? Early, and be solid on what your answers are to your core. Once you have the backbone of your story down, everything else will come naturally and it will become a narrative rather than a few written answers on an application. And so I got to thank Bren so much, to share this story. How many people are willing to share that, yeah, he didn't get into his target schools the first year applied. And it was only until round 2 of his second year applying that he got into Emory. And it's true that, these schools do have limited data points on you, no matter how much you try to make your case. And that you should apply to multiple schools because in some sense, the admissions process is a crapshoot. Nothing is guaranteed, right? And you can't take it personally, although I'm sure everyone who has been dinged takes it personally. I know I have. Whenever someone dings me, I take it personally. I want to show them. But that's just who I am, right? But I think it's such good advice. If going to a top business school is important to you, if it's an important stepping stone to, the career you envision and want for yourself, to not get discouraged and to really know your story. And I like the way he said it, to know these questions, why MBA, why now, why this business school, get that story down early and be solid on what your answers are to your core. It can't sound manufactured in your essays. It can't sound manufactured in your interviews. And I think Bren went through this process, over 2 years where he just finally felt comfortable knowing what his answers were, making sure they were authentic and saying those instead of trying to guess what admissions teams wanted to hear. Not playing that game, but just knowing to the core of your being, deep in your bones, why you're applying to get an MBA, why it's so important to get it now, and why this business school is the best fit. I want to thank all 3 of these applicants, Da-Ming, Will, and Bren, for sharing their stories with me at Touch MBA. We actually have 4 more other lessons that I think are just as useful. So I'll probably do a second episode where I walk through some of those posts. But to sum up the lessons from this episode, again, if you're not from a blue chip company, be sure to show the quality of your work experience. Be sure to set a context for what makes your company special. Number 2, choose your priorities, then your schools. Researching schools is necessary to see how they fit into your matrix of priorities. And finally, 3, don't take rejection personally. Know your MBA story so well, make sure it's authentic, that it rings through your bones. Okay. So I want to wish you guys a happy 2024, a successful application season. Remember, if you're listening to this and you want to share your journey, you can share it at touchmba.com/contact. If you want to publish your story, I'd love to share it, especially if it can really help applicants who will soon be in your shoes. So thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Touch MBA podcast. Peace. Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Remember, you can get free school selection help and a profile review at touchmba.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Just search for Touch MBA.